Guys, welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today I've got Ben Brochu of Shadow Valley Outfitters on the line. Ben, how are you?
Very well. How about yourself, Jay?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to talking to you a little bit about the deer deadline that we have coming up in June 6th here, I guess next Tuesday. It's application season, and, we've had a wet winter. It's a pretty exciting time to be a deer hunter, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you to get your take on how things look out there on the landscape.
Yeah, for sure. We're very excited. I think a lot of people are excited in Arizona, both residents and non-residents, with a bunch of bonus points, and things are looking great.
Yeah, before we get into that, for those listeners that don't know Ben, I first met Ben when he was with the Arizona Game and Fish Department, and Ben can fill you guys in on this, but he was with the Game and Fish Department for many years and was doing a lot of the helicopter surveys and was I believe in charge of several units down in southern Arizona. And I believe you're a firefighter now, right, Ben?
That's correct. I now work for Tucson Fire. I made the jump back in 2016, I guess, and for me, it was more opportunities both professionally and personally, and I was still in the public safety retirement, so I didn't lose any time in that regard, and it's afforded me lots of different opportunities and flexibility. So it's been great.
And more time off to scout and take people hunting. You have done a really good job with the Shadow Valley guys, Pat and Bob, and you have formed a really nice company and do a really good job. I want to kind of tackle into some of these southern Arizona units, some of the central Arizona units, and talk mostly about Coues deer since that's your bread and butter, and some mule deer as well. But first of all, how are things looking out there on the landscape as far as vegetation, moisture, expectations for antler growth, and such from what you see with the data and the variables that you have right in front of you?
Yeah, for sure. And again, much appreciated for everything. Everything's looking tremendous. I mean, from the north end of the state to the south end, we've had back-to-back great monsoons. Up until now, we've had this year great winter rainfall, great spring rain, and even here recently, kind of middle of May, we had upwards of a half an inch in different spots throughout the state, and which generally is May is typically the driest month of the year in Arizona, so it comes at a perfect time. And if we just have an average monsoon, I mean, we're going to be tremendous, and we're already going to be great for elk in northern Arizona mule deer. I mean, things are looking awesome on the north rim right now. They're still dealing with snowpack, for buffalo hunters and stuff like that. So, yeah, we're really excited about this year, and for all species, not just Coues deer.
Ben, for those people listening, maybe from out of state, they don't realize that, May and June typically, like you said, are our driest months. But, I mean, when you're talking in Arizona and you're talking the driest month in Arizona, it's really dry compared to most other places. And when you say that we've actually had some May showers, if it's any indication of what the monsoon might be, that's fantastic. But May showers, it actually gets those deer, their body condition. A half an inch of rain can mean a whole lot, I guess is where I'm going with this, where other people think a half inch of rain is nothing. For the Arizona deserts to get a half an inch of rain in May, where those deer are dropping their antlers, they're able to find some green feed and get their body in good condition prior to them growing. How much impact do you think that's going to have on antler growth?
Oh, it's going to have a tremendous impact on antler growth. on overall body condition, reproductive capability, and success, and the rut later on too this year. Generally speaking, we'll have the winter and spring rains up until March and maybe April around Easter weekend, and then it's typically dry up until around the 4th of July. And in June we'll see temperatures around the southern and central part of the state upwards of 100 to 115 in Phoenix. And so during that time, that vegetation gets super dry, and deer, especially mule deer, will feed on those different plants throughout the year, or that summer period, going from like chain fruit cholla to mesquite when it's blooming, and then palo verde when it's blooming, and some of the saguaro fruits and different things. And so when we've got rain in May like this, what we've had, you get that little green up as a result of that, and it really goes a long ways for these desert adapted species like desert mule deer, Coues deer, desert sheep, things like that.
Have you looked at the models? And I know they're not always accurate, but I have not seen the projected monsoon flow or any projected models. Have you looked at it to see if it's supposed to be below or above or average?
I haven't, and I haven't seen anything that suggests anything extreme, whether it's a La Nina or El Nino type setup or anything like that. From what I've heard, all indications was that it's kind of an average year, but nothing extreme at all that I've seen. So again, that's great news from our regard. So
sure. I know on Shadow Valley's Instagram, you guys put out, and I think you have a newsletter too or something that you put out, and you basically talk about the different units for Coues deer and for desert mule deer that you like. And I think you even kind of rank them from, best to worst. I think you even rank them from, people that don't have mobility to, people that can really go, and kind of give suggestions on units. I believe you're also, using tag numbers and, trending and, different variables that you're seeing going on in those units. If you would kind of highlight some of those units and kind of go through them and give some of that data, if you will, so people can kind of hear your take on the different hunt availabilities and unit structures.
Yeah, for sure. And so this is probably, I don't know, the third or fourth year I've tried to do this. And initially I was trying to rank units, 1 through 10. In the last 2 years, I've kind of taken a different approach in that, what I would consider is that, the top 10 units that are trophy potential type units. And then I don't rank them 1 through 10 anymore. I just list my opinion of the top 10. You're going to have differing opinions throughout a lot of different folks around the state. And then I try to break it out into physicality as well. One of the things I've learned over the last few years in talking with lots of hunters, many of which non-resident hunters and in different application services, is, you might have a non-resident hunter that literally has 13 to 15 bonus points or something like that they want a quality Coues deer hunt. And when you start talking with them, they might be in their mid 70s. And what I've tried to do is really talk with folks and provide personal recommendations based on their physical ability, what they want out of the hunt, their schedule, things like that, so that it's a fun hunt for them. I've seen some folks that have drawn some tags that are in extremely physical units that, generally speaking, are backpack type units that's where you're going to be the most successful in, and they're in their low to mid 70s and really have no business of hunting a unit like that. And they could hunt a flatter unit where there's more deer potentially, where they're going to see deer and still have potential at a great buck. So That's been kind of my approach in the last maybe 2 years or so, and and I can go through some of these specifically, in my top 10. And again, so this sheet is on our social media page. I think I sent it out a couple weeks ago once, the regulations came out, and also the draw odds and whatnot. And I use Go Hunt for draw odds. And so I'll just kind of go down this list. And again, this is available on our social media platforms. I'll talk about some of the central Arizona units that I would regard as top tier units. Unit 6A in units 23. There have been some tremendous deer killed historically in those two units. 6A has got a mix of heavy forest and some more open country. So it's got some country that's very glassable. 23, it has more, what I would call more forest type vegetation, and you're really banking on deer kind of coming out of the woodwork during the rut in 23, in 22 as well, versus some of these southern Arizona units in 6A and a unit like 21 per se. So these central Arizona units, you may see far fewer deer in those units holding out and looking for a big one. Whereas some of these southern Arizona units, you're going to see a lot of deer, and you just have to filter through those to find one you want to harvest. So in talking with people, I really try to provide some insight in that, hey, if you want to hunt 6A, if you want to hunt 23, 22, Unit 8, 6B, something like that, you may go a day without even seeing a deer potentially. But there's a lower deer density in some of those units, but you're searching for a big buck. Whereas units in southern Arizona, you might go through 50 to 100 deer a day just trying to find deer. So at least providing people with information that then they can make a decision of, okay, hey, I might draw a southern Arizona unit. I'm going to see a lot of deer. I'm just going to have to filter through those deer for a big buck versus I've waited 10 plus years for a tag and I may not see any deer on a central Arizona unit hoping for a big buck like that. So as long as folks go into it, making an informed decision, that is what we try to do, and provide recommendations based on those things. So, but yeah, so 6A and 23, 6A has got some very physical component stuff to it, but it's also got some very huntable areas too. So I don't have it labeled as a physical unit per se, even though there are spots in 6A that can be physical. 23, I would consider a very physical unit if you're going to be successful, generally speaking. There's always exceptions, but don't expect to see a lot of deer in 23 in most areas, depending on where you're hunting. And it can be very spotty too in terms of the rut. Sometimes the rut doesn't even kick in until the last week of December or even in January. So, understand that even though these are rut hunts, you may not be seeing some rut activity. But on a year like this, where everything is looking great, animals are going to be in great physical shape, I would expect a decent rut this year. And then moving down the list, I've got 27. 27, since they initiated the archery, the OTC restrictions, both for non-residents and for the harvest thresholds, some of these units are going to, especially from a mule deer standpoint, but some of these units are going to produce some great deer. Like Unit 1 and 27 closed down very early archery OTC last year for mule deer, and that's really going to impact the age class there. So if you're a mule deer hunter, you're going to see some older age class deer in a lot of those non-traditional units separate from the kaibab and the strip and so on and so forth. As I go down the list, we get into the southern Arizona units. So those I've got listed on my list are 29, 31, 33, 34A, and then the 36s. I would consider 29, 31, and 33 all very physical hunts, meaning if, generally speaking, to be successful, ideally plan on doing some backpack style hunts, or at least doing some day type packing things where you can get back into some country and find some of those older age class deer that Joe Public hunter, on a day trip or a weekend trip may not see or have access to. If you're not a very physical hunter, there are some options in those units, but generally speaking, if I would suggest that you consider something different, like in the 36s, if you're not too physical, where you have equal numbers of deer, but it's much more huntable from near a vehicle or climbing up to high points glassing and digging up these deer out of the flat country. But those units, 27, 29, 31, and 33, are all producing some great deer right now. 29, 31, and 33 they've all had fires relatively recently too, that, really do a lot of things for deer. In 2019, we had the Bighorn fire in Unit 33, and it was followed by a super dry monsoon, so we actually lost some deer post fire. But we've had back-to-back monsoons, and the deer have responded very well. Great antler growth in 33. Same with 31 and 29. I mean, we've had some fires in the last 5+ years in those units, and they continue to produce 110+ deer year after year. So all three of those, I think, are great options if you're a physical type hunter.
One question, Ben, 33 forever has been kind of the crown jewel of southern Arizona. With that fire and with some deer loss, it definitely took a hit. Do you think it's back to par before the fire, or do you think it's even better as far as trophy quality before the fire? Where do you think we're at in the spectrum of that?
Yeah, for sure. So from a deer number standpoint, we're still growing. We're not where we used to be pre-fire. But the last 2 years, I've seen does with twin fawns. They're surviving. They're doing well. So that unit is exploding right now and will continue to explode, just like what it did back in 2003, 2004 when we had the Bullock and Aspen fire. And it literally, that deer herd in there exploded, and they had to create different hunts to be able to put people, because biologically they could offer more tags, but they were running into hunter crowding and density issues. So 33 will continue to improve. It's not where it was pre-fire from a number standpoint, but from a trophy quality potential, it's doing great. And you're going to see a year like this, you're going to see some of those younger deer that are going to produce a bunch of antler, whereas typically you might have a more mature deer that it takes, they have to get to years 6, 7+ to be able to put on some great antler. Now you might have a 3.5, 4.5-year-old deer with great genetics that's going to, be over that 110 mark.
Okay, good stuff. Keep going.
And then moving on, 34A is another one on my list, or my top 10 list. 34A has produced some great deer historically and will continue to produce some great deer. It's got a mix of kind of low elevation desert grassland up to some pretty high country pine type forests. And it's always up there in terms of producing deer. And there's a mix of stuff in 34A as well, where there is some physical type country that you can get into, but there's also some very huntable country in some mixed pinyon juniper and Arizona chaparral type habitat that you can get on a high point in glass and just pick that stuff apart and find deer. So it's doing very good. And then that takes me to the 36s, 36A, B, and C. All of these units, and I would also add, I've had a lot of questions this year about the border traffic and things like that, with all the things we've been hearing on the news. There is a lot of border activity right now. We see folks crossing on a regular basis. We've never had issues whatsoever, but we see that sometimes almost on a daily basis, depending on where you're hunting. So, if that makes you uncomfortable, maybe think elsewhere. But these units have super high deer density. They've got a mix of rolling kind of desert grassland into some mesquite and ocotillo thickets that those deer would just go into, and you just have to dig them up. And all three of those units produce great deer each and every year. 36C is kind of unique in that on the western side of C, it abuts the Tohono O'odham Indian Reservation. So that's always kind of a draw for me in terms of what kind of a deer could come over from the reservation. They don't have much for really anything for game management over there, so or even organized hunts per se. So you kind of get some source sink dynamics in that regard from 36C from the reservation. And then 36B, I mean, there's some country in 36B that, again, it abuts the Mexico on the south. Super high country in the Tumacacres, and then low rolling hills. And I think 36B right now has got the highest deer density of all the southern Arizona units from a Coues deer standpoint, in terms of hunt numbers and things like that. So expect to see a lot of deer, and just filter through those deer to try and find a good one. But if you're an older hunter and not up for backpacking, I would certainly be looking at those 36s, 34, some of those units like that. And you're going to see a lot of deer. You're going to have a great time, lots of opportunity, and just, wait for that special one that really gets your blood flowing and go from there.
Does that round out your top 10?
Yeah, that rounds out the top 10. And, I would add, there are a lot of hunts, if you're especially a non-resident or even a resident that you just want to hunt, there are some tremendous tags that you can get and hunt virtually every year for Coues deer if you want to do that. I was listening to another podcast here recently, and they made a point on there, and I think it's very accurate in that every Coues deer unit in the state has the potential to produce, a Boone and Crockett type deer. You have some of these units, though, that historically do better than others, whether it's because of genetics, predation, feed, a number of different factors that all produce great deer. So there are a lot of Coues deer units that you really can't go wrong in, but generally some of these produce more than others. So yeah, and if you're just after a tag, you can get, with very few bonus points, if any, you can almost guarantee yourself a Coues deer tag if you're flexible. If you consider that mid-November type hunt time frame, some of the muzzleloader opportunities are great, so on and so forth.
Let me ask you a question. If someone calls you and they say, whatever it may be, 15 points, or I can draw any tag, any Coues deer tag out there. I'm not asking specifically which unit. What I'm asking is if you know of big deer, is there ever times when you say, listen, you got way too many points for the hunt that I want to take you on, but there's a specific deer that we want to target, and you're guaranteed to draw that, and yes, you'll be burning points. You don't need that many points, but there's a deer that we need to take you, and there's, a deer in this unit, a deer in that unit, a deer in this unit. Let's go after some of these October, November hunts. yes, it's too many points. Yes, you've kind of wasted a few points, but the deer that we'll be going after is worth it. Is that ever a strategy of yours?
Yeah, it is all the time. I mean, and again, I try to have that conversation with hunters, trying to see what what kind of physical shape they're in, what they want out of the hunt, and what they're going to be happy with. And not feeling, making sure that they're not feeling duped in terms of, hey, I just wasted 15 bonus points on a early October hunt, which a lot of us as residents, we really like those early October hunts because you can pattern a deer all through the summer and watch them and have that first crack at a deer come October. But we try to have that conversation all the time with folks and make sure that whatever they decide to do, that they're doing, making an informed decision, that there's no surprises at the end of the day in terms of physicality and whatnot, and, try to build the hunt to really fit their goals and objectives and hunting style.
Do you feel like, with the pre-scouting that you do, that some of those October hunts are some of the best chances to get some of the best trophies? I mean, if you had, let's just say you had the 15 bonus points that would get you any tag in the state, and would you lean towards those October hunts just because it's a little more calculated, and like you said, you can have them patterned, whereas some of those December hunts, they might go on a walkabout and you may lose them.
Yeah, for sure. And with the right hunter, all day long, and that's the thing that, with those early hunts, obviously, like you'd mentioned, you can pattern those deer. You can have that first crack at them, and typically they're not going to be that far from where they were in those summer months. Whereas December, not only do you risk having another hunter kill them for all the previous hunts, they could move around more. They get into some red activity. They go on walkabouts. There is more potential, but a lot of people like the idea of hunting deer in the rut. And here's the kicker too with Coues deer especially, is sometimes they don't even rut until in January or even February.
Right. So when you get that December tag, sometimes it's really no rut. Most of the time there's not a lot of rut, and you've
Correct.
basically let 3 other hunt structures or hunt dates go in front of you, hoping to get a little bit of rut, whereas you could take the opposite approach and be like, I'm going to hire Ben. He's been watching this deer all summer. We're going to go with the October hunt and try and bang him right out of the gate.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing too. It's hard for a hunter sometimes to make that decision to forego a possible rut hunt, for an October hunt if they've been waiting 12, 13, 15 years for a tag. But again, having those conversations and at the end of the day, it's their decision on what they want to do for their app, and all I can do is provide information and, with them to make a good informed decision, knowing that if you sign up for an October hunt, expect to do backpack style hunts. It's going to be potentially hot and miserable, but the reward can be far better sometimes than even a red hunt.
Let me ask you about desert mule deer and your thoughts on some of the units out there that you would be looking at for a better mule deer hunt than others. Are there any that jump out at you as couple of better mule deer units out there?
From a desert mule deer standpoint, I assume you're talking about rifle options, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. A year like this, where we've had, again, we're leading into we've had great monsoon rain the last 2 years, great winter rain, great spring rain. We had the widespread shower in May. Antler growth is going to be really good, and those mule deer are going to be healthy throughout the entire state, and especially the southern half of the state. There's units like, historically 37A, 37B, that are kind of the more desert type units, that are producing some great deer. 37B is nowhere what it used to be in terms of back in the heyday in the 80s and 90s, where they had, over 1,000, 1,500 permits. But it's always producing some really good deer. 30A is one of those units too that there's a lot of potential down there, and it's fairly easy to get those tags. And you just have to sift through some of those deer to try and find a special one, knowing that during the rifle hunts in southern Arizona, it's not a red hunt. Those deer are typically in the flattest of flat country, and you just have to, whether it be glass them up or whatever your hunting style is, try and find those deer, whatever you're looking for in terms of expectations. The 36s right now, 36A, A, B, and C, but especially A. I mean, there are a gob of mule deer down there right now. So everything is looking really good with the current archery OTC hunting structure. I mean, I think you're going to continue to see those units even improve more as they start to restrict, January rut hunting with archery. So, I think any of the 36s, the 37s, and 30A, I don't know that you could go wrong with any of those.
Ben, do you mess with the desert sheep much?
I do a lot.
Talk about some of the units you like there.
So in southern Arizona, I mean, if you can draw a sheep tag anywhere in Arizona, then again, you're doing very good. And there's trophy potential in every unit. We generally speaking, we specialize in like the silver bells, so that's 37A, Aravipa, which is 31 and 32. 37B, the minerals, and some surrounding country too. Some of 28 a little bit. Sheep are doing very well right now in all those units. And I was just talking with a gentleman the other day. He's at max points and talking about what to apply. And in reality, there are a half dozen units that you could not go wrong with. That again, you're splitting hairs in terms of trying to find that high 70s, even potential for low 80s type sheep. All those units have that right now. We killed a sheep that went, I'm trying to think what he scored, 184 in Aravipa last year. I think it was the biggest Mexicana that was killed, and that was in Aravipa, 31-32. So,
don't you think that the last two monsoon years that we've had, I mean, if we could throw a third monsoon, granted the monsoons have been a little late, but they've been fantastic.
Yep.
The gap in the age rings, the gap of growth, I think when we look back 5, 6, 7 years from now, I think we're going to see big gaps where those sheep actually really put on some inches, in those 3, 4, 5, 6 year ages. And then when we're, killing them at, 8, 9, 10 years old. But I guess what I'm saying is it's going to be really fun, I think, to look back in about 5 years to 21, 22, and hopefully 23 monsoon and be able to go look at the growth that ram put on between those rings. Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, you're going to see those sheep that have great genetics that just literally take off. And you'll see the ones with less than great genetics where they kind of just top out. But, you're going to see some 7-year-old rams that are, high 70s, even low 80 type sheep in a lot of these units. 37A right now is producing a gob of sheep. It's got 3 different hunts. With the average goal there, I think a 170 plus is very doable. And even holding out for the mid 70s and even upper 70s too. 31, 32, again, tremendous potential. You get some sheep coming off the reservation too a little bit. Great potential in all these units. 28, they added another hunt in 28, so they've got 2 different hunts there, both with 2 tags. It's produced some great sheep year after year and will continue to do so. And even
Western Arizona right now too. The COFA is doing very well. 43B. All those units have had great monsoon rain. Have had some great winter rain, and so sheep in general in Arizona are doing very good. And when you can have a sheep tag in your pocket, and you're talking about trying to hold out for a 170 plus ram, that's right away your goal is over Boone Crockett, and that's a special thing, put it that way.
For sure. Thanks for all of your time. Before we let you go, how's the elk looking? What do you think about this year as far as elk? What are your thoughts?
Boy, it's going to be tremendous. Again, I was talking with James Vine, who's our lead Kaibab guy, and everything up north right now. They had like 9 days straight of rain with that last little May system that went through. My parents live up in the heart of 23, and they had 2 inches of rain with the last showers that went through. It's going to be great. Elk are going to be in tremendous shape. I think it's going to be a very strong rut, and you're going to have some big bulls killed this year for sure. So if you got an elk tag, I think you're a very lucky person. And if you're a non-resident with an elk tag and haven't considered hiring a guide yet, this may be the year to do so if you can afford it.
Absolutely. Always love talking to you. I want to give you a chance to let the listeners know how they can reach out and hear from you. I also want to thank the sponsors, GoHunt.com. Guys, it's Memorial Day weekend. Go to GoHunt.com, go to the gear shop. There's a bunch of stuff, 50% off. Also, they're having their, if you sign up for the Explorer maps right now and use Memorial 50, you actually pay $50, you get 50 back. It's free, so you can get the Explorer maps for free. Coues.com, Coues Ultralight Hunting, that's the gear that I wear on all my hunts. Go to Coues.com to order. Phonescope.com, use the JScott23 promo code. You're going to get a 10% discount. And then LathropandSons.com. Lathrop & Sons do the 3D mapping kits for your feet. They've got the custom Synergy footbeds. Phenomenal boot line. They've got an Elite boot, Mountain Hunter boot, and the Encompass. All 3 are fantastic boots. Go to LathropandSons.com and check them out. Ben, why don't you tell the listeners how they can find out more about you, how they can follow you guys at Shadow Valley, and if they want to reach out to you directly?
Yeah, for sure. And again, thank you, Joe. As always, we appreciate it. I enjoyed chatting with you as well. And so we've got pages on both Instagram and Facebook on social media. Send us a message. Don't hesitate to reach out. We've got our website, shadowvalleyoutfitters.com. There's contact numbers there, and that's probably the best way to get in touch with us. So
awesome.
Again, if you have any questions, even wanting to discuss application strategies or whatever it is, we're here to help.
Awesome, buddy. Well, God bless, and look forward to seeing you guys' success this fall, and I'll be following along, and I know others will too, and keep up the great work, okay?
Awesome. Thank you, Jerry. I appreciate it.
All right, buddy.